Hey everyone, Eric here. I'm super excited because in this video, we're checking out the XS V2 from Old Blood Noise Endeavors. So like I said in the intro, we're going over the XS V2. Now, the XS V2 is the follow-up to one of my favorite pedals, the XS version 1 from Old Blood Noise Endeavors. Now, what the XS is, at its heart, the XS is a distortion and a modulation section kind of combined into one pedal. V2 implements quite a few changes and improvements. So let's go ahead and just jump into the distortion controls. On the top row here, we have the distortion controls. We have distortion level, we have tone, and gain. These are going to be pretty familiar controls. The distortion level, of course, is going to be our output volume. So if we want quieter sounds, we turn it down. If we want louder sounds, we can turn it up. And now one thing to note is that the distortion section in the XS V2 is quite a bit louder than the distortion section in XS version 1. Now, XS version 1 wasn't lacking any output. It got way louder than Unity, but one of the improvements that I enjoy is the fact that the distortion section is quite a bit louder. So let's go ahead and hear the clean signal. Here's the XS with the distortion volume close to minimum. And then of course we can boost it from there. Moving on, we have the tone control. Now, if we want brighter sounds, we can turn the control up or clockwise. If we want darker sounds, we can turn it counterclockwise. So here is the darkest setting on the XS distortion. In my ears is an improvement again over V1, because in V1 we had, it was a decent sound, lots of treble. I like a lot of treble in my guitar signal. So with the tone knob all the way up, it was a decent amount of treble, but I kind of always wanted more. With the XS V2, the distortion, the tone control in the distortion section does give you that extra clarity in the high end. So let's go ahead and set that to like 75%. And then we're going to move on to the gain control. Again, the gain control has been improved. On the XS V1, we kind of got distortion or no distortion. So it sounded great, but we didn't have much gain sweep. It was kind of like once you started turning the gain up, you were into distortion just right off the bat. Now with the XS V2, we do have a lot more play in that gain range, so we can get some pretty nice low gain sounds. So let's go ahead and set it all the way at the minimum. So you can hear we have a clean setting right there. Now, as we kick up that gain, we're going to introduce more distortion into our signal, but again, it's kind of on a more gradual scale. We're not going to jump right into distortion. So let's hear how that sounds. In the XS version 1, we had a foot switch for on-off, and we have a foot switch to change between chorus and delay. Now, in the XS V2, we have 2 foot switches, one to turn the distortion section on, like that, one to turn the modulation section on, just like that. The distortion works as a normal on-off, so you press it, it turns off, you press it again, it turns on. The modulation section can do the same thing, so you can press it to turn it on, press it to turn it off, or you can press and hold to momentarily turn it on, and then when you let go, it'll instantly turn off. So you can use the modulation section in that way, but the distortion section is just on-off. Now, in the modulation section, we have this toggle switch right here, which lets us choose what kind of modulation we want in the XS. So right now we're in the chorus mode, but we also have delay and a harmonized fifth mode, which was a secret setting in XS V1, but has been expanded on in XS V2. So let's go ahead and stick in the chorus mode, and then we're going to go over each of these controls right here, because whichever modulation mode you're in, you control it with these controls. Now, similar to the distortion section, we have a mod volume, which controls our output volume. We don't have an independent control on the top of the pedal for wet-dry mix of our modulation section, but there is a trim pot on the PCB inside. So by default, it's set to blend 50% dry, 50% wet. But if you have a specific request, you can open up the back of the pedal and fine-tune that with the PCB trim pot. Next to the mod volume, we have the time. This is our speed control. So in the chorus mode, it's going to control our chorus rate. Next to the time knob, we have depth, and this is kind of how extreme that pitch modulation in the chorus is going to change your pitch. So if we want a more subtle, a less kind of warbly sound, we can turn it all the way down. And this often pairs well with higher speeds because you get a lot of movement, but not as far away from your normal pitch. And then of course we can increase that warbliness by turning the depth up. I'm going to put the toggle switch in the right position. That is the modulation mode toggle. And we're in delay mode now. Our time control is our delay repeat, and then our depth controls the delay feedback, so how many repeats we get. Let's go ahead and turn the time all the way down. You're not really hearing much because it's so fast. Now, as we turn that time up, we're going to get a longer delay. So from here, we're moving on to the depth control. Again, that is the amount of repeats we have. So if we just want one repeat, we can turn the depth knob back down. And then of course, as we turn the depth knob up, we're going to introduce more repeats to our signal. So you can hear that we're almost on the edge of like self-oscillating. Now, the excess will actually not self-oscillate. It'll kind of create a bed of repeats under your playing, but it's not going to run away, kind of like other delay pedals do. So if we turn that depth all the way up, we're going to get a lot of repeat. So now moving on to the last mode in the modulation toggle, this is the fifth. Now the fifth harmonization mode was present on XSV1, but it was a secret setting. You had to turn one knob all the way up, and then you only got one control after that. But now in XSV2, it's been allotted its own position on the toggle, and we have these three controls for the fifth mode. The mod volume is the same. If we want quieter sounds, we can turn that down. The time controls our pitch shifted signal. Now, at minimum, it's going to be closest to following what you're playing. So this is what it sounds like. Now, also, it is polyphonic, so you can put in multiple notes like I just did, and it's going to track both of them. So with the time at minimum, we get the quickest repeat, the quickest following of what we're playing. And as we turn that time control up, our pitched up repeat comes back slower. So let's hear how that sounds. That sounds so cool. And now we're going to go on to the depth control. This is kind of like our delay feedback. So thus far we've had it on minimum, which means we're only getting one repeat pitched up played back. Now as we increase this depth control, it's going to introduce more repeats. But what actually happens is the repeat is fed back into the front of this pitched up signal. So with every repeat, we get a higher octave of that fifth. So let's hear how that sounds. This is with one repeat. Now I'm going to start to turn that depth control up, which introduces more repeats. You know what? Let's go ahead and turn that time control up just so we can really clearly hear what it's doing. And then we can keep going from there with the depth control. I could get lost in that for hours, so let's go ahead and turn it all the way up. So my point there was to note that with the depth all the way up at maximum, you're not going to self-oscillate in this pitched up fifth mode. The real magic of the excess, of course, is when we blend both the distortion and modulation section. And this toggle right here in the middle of the pedal lets us do that in different ways. This is our series parallel toggle, essentially. On XS-V1, we only had a series parallel, and in series, it ran our distortion into the modulation. With the XS-V2, we actually have a 3-position toggle right here, which lets us choose either distortion first into modulation, or modulation first into distortion. Or we can do a parallel mode again, where neither of the distortion or modulation are being affected by one another. So let's go ahead and put the modulation to the chorus mode. Pretty big depth, pretty slow speed. So here's the modulation. And then I'm gonna go ahead and set a pretty high gain setting on the distortion side. So right now the toggle is in the left position labeled distortion first. So when we have both of the distortion and the modulation on, we're going to run the distortion into the modulation and then to the output. And this is the classic XS-V1 sound. So let's hear how that sounds. So that is with the distortion run into the modulation. If we switch the toggle over to the left position, now we're running the modulation into the distortion. So what I want to do now is I want to flip back and forth because they have distinct different sounds if you run the modulation into the distortion or vice versa. And then in the middle position on this toggle switch, we have parallel, which means neither effect is being run into one another. They're running side by side. So if we turn both of them on, right now it kind of sounds out of balance because the distortion is way louder than the modulation. And this lets you get a bunch of different textures. Now, the distortion sits, alongside the modulation, not really mushing up the modulation or providing too much nastiness. So now I've got my callings plugged in, and we're going to go over the expression control inside the XSV2. Now prior on XSV1, it was more straightforward, so you plugged in an expression controller and you got control of either the time or the depth control. But the expression control inside XSV2 has been upgraded, and it deals with expression in a little bit different way, but it's a lot more powerful. Now you also have to set this one up. So in order to get into the expression control, we press and hold both foot switches until the lights start to blink. So now that our lights are blinking slowly, we set the heel down position. So whatever you want the expression control to be set to at minimum when your heel is pressed down. Let's kind of go over what I am going for here. I want this kind of ethereal fifth echo sound, but I want the time to be controlled ever so slightly, just a tiny bit, to give a little bit of pitch warble. So I'm going to go ahead and set the time control to about 30% or so, 25-30%. And then I'm going to go ahead and set the depth all the way down. This is the heel down position. Once we've set our desired heel down position in the time and depth knobs, that's a good thing to note, the expression controls time and depth. Once we set the heel down position, we can press and hold the switches again, both simultaneously, and then our lights will eventually start to blink quicker. Now we're into the toe down, the heel up, the toe down position, so the other end of the spectrum. So what I want to do is I want to turn my time knob ever so slightly, maybe up to, what is that, about 40%, because I just want a tiny bit of time modulation. And with the depth, I'm going to go all the way up to the maximum. And so when you have those set how you want, you just press and hold the foot switches again until they stop blinking. And now you have expression control over those parameters. So just to kind of reiterate, what I've done is I've set the depth control to have its full range. So from 0 to 100%, heel down is 0% on the depth control. Toe down, heel up, is 100% on the depth control. So wherever I set the expression control, it's going to affect the whole entire depth range of that control. Now the time control is almost the opposite. At the heel down position, I set it to about 30%. At the toe down position, I set it to about 40%. So on the expression control, we have a very limited window that we're affecting with the time right here. So now I can turn the expression ramper on here, and we can set our A point and B point, because the expression ramper lets you, seamlessly control expression controls without having to have a physical expression controller at your feet. So what I'll do is I'll turn it to A right here. Over here on the toggle, on the right hand toggle, we can set our A point. I'll go all the way down, which again means at minimum on the expression ramper right now is minimum on the depth and about 20-30% on the time. So now I can flip to point B, and let's just go ahead and put it all the way up at 100%, which again translates to 100% on depth, 40% on time. Now we can flip down to the rate on the right hand toggle here, and I want a slower rate. When we press the foot switch, it's going to start ramping between the two. And actually, I'm going to set it to the triangle wave so it ramps back and forth between the 2 points. So here's what this setting sounds like without the expression ramper engaged. Now let's go ahead and engage the expression ramper. So, you know, to my ear, it sounds cool, but it might be a little bit too much warble on the far end. So what I'll do is I'll press the foot switch again to stop the ramp. And I'm gonna go ahead and set the A position to about, what is that, 30%? And the B position is going to be about 75%. Rate, again, I want slow. And again, here is static. And now we're gonna engage the expression ramper. Okay, that's sounding really cool, but I'm not really liking how the depth control is being, you know, I want more repeats all the time. Essentially what I'm saying is I want to take the depth control out of the equation. So what we do is we enter the expression setup again, press and hold until the foot switch lights are flashing slowly, and then all I want to do is manipulate the time now. So we're going to leave the depth untouched. So I want to set the time back down to like that 20% or so, leaving the depth untouched. Press and hold again to get the toe down position now. This is the highest range. And then I just want to go ahead and set that to about 40%. Again, leave the depth untouched. Press and hold again. And now we're out of the expression setup. The depth control is now not being controlled with the expression controller. And so we can go ahead and set our A point at minimum, B point on the expression ramper to maximum, and then again, slow rate. And now what we're doing is we're only controlling the time control because we've taken the depth control out of the expression control. I hope you enjoyed this look at the XS-V2 from Old Blood Noise Endeavors. If you did, let me know in the comments below what you think of this XS-V2. Did you have the first one? Did you like the first one? Do you like this one? Let me know in the comments below. Also, I would love to know what pedals you would use the XS alongside of, just on your pedal board, or would you just run with the XS by itself? Let me know that in the comments below. I also want to send a huge thank you to these folks right here, my executive producers from my Patreon page. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so very much. If you watching this would like to help support the channels and my efforts here on the internet, I'll leave a link in the description below to my Patreon page. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself.